success of our educational system since the department, there's not one parameter that's better. So why not take that money and just send it to the states and let the states do what they do better than we do? You know, it's interesting. You can be a teacher in Oklahoma, and as far as the Department of Education is concerned, you don't know what to do. But you can move that same teacher up here to become a bureaucrat, and all of a sudden she's empowered to tell everybody what to do, with no difference in training. That doesn't fit. And the fact is we've lost local control of our schools and our educational system. We've lost our educational advantage, and it needs to be returned to the states. And we do that in the $9 trillion.
Linda on Twitter follows up to your national sales tax concept and asks, if it's that promising, Senator Coburn, then why isn't there a bill on the floor?
There is a bill, because they won't let us get it to the floor. There's 21 co-sponsors in the United States Senate. Chairman Baucus won't let it come through the Committee on Finance.
Pinehurst, North Carolina, for Senator Coburn. Francis, an independent there. Go ahead, please, Francis.
Yes, Senator, I admire you a great deal. I watch you on the Senate floor all the time, and I wish you would consider running for president. We need you. You're probably one of the most honest men in our government, and I just think that you could do so much for our country, and I know many people are watching you, and we couldn't pick a better man, and I wish you would consider. One suggestion, I would like to see a bill passed that there wouldn't be any campaigning until 6 months before our election, and this way we wouldn't be worried about all this money. You couldn't possibly raise the money in 6 months that they're now doing in 3 years, and that would make it, I think, a lot better for our election system. Thank you so much, and please consider running. We would all vote for you. Thank you.
Well, you're very kind to suggest that. I'm going to run for dinner is what I'm going to run. I'm in my last term in the Senate, and I'm 63 years of age. I will have spent 18 years in service to the country, representing the fine people of Oklahoma. And, you know, I'm not sure that's something that I'm supposed to do. But I will tell you, I agree. First of all, I think the fact that all the media talks about the presidential race. The presidential race is still 16, 17, 18 months away. It is causing us not to focus on the problems at hand. And we are also seeing people making decisions based on a potential re-election 16 months, 17 months from now. I think that hurts us. And I'll go back. That's why I believe in term limits. I think if we had term limits to the members of Congress, you wouldn't see as much foolishness. People wouldn't be trying to gain advantage partisan-wise. The partisan problems aren't near as bad as the press makes them out to be here. But press loves a fight, so anytime there's a difference, they exaggerate it. But I think if you had term limits, we would see a big difference in what happens in Washington, how things work. The amount of angst that the country sees over the disagreement would be less because people will be coming here to get something done before they go home.
Next caller is from San Antonio. This is Mike, who's a Republican. You're on for the senator. Go ahead, please.
Hi, yeah.
Good morning, Mike.
I agree with the senator as far as making spending cuts. I think that's definitely the way to go. I would like to make a suggestion that your viewers can go to the IRS website and find stats for taxes from 2008, and they can paste those tables right into Excel, do the math themselves. They'll find out that something like a 39% rate only brings in $8.7 billion in additional dollars in a year. It's peanuts. The only way we're going to get to where we need to be is to cut spending.
Yeah, that's a great point. In 2008, the top 20% in this country paid 84% of all the taxes. Paid 84% of all the taxes. And so if you raise taxes, what you see is tax avoidance start happening. And what we know historically is the government can get up around 18.8, 18.9, maybe 19.5% like we did in 2001, close to 20 with the tech bubble. But what people do is they start changing their behavior to lower that. So the other thing is the government's twice the size it was 10 years ago. Twice. Even with the $9 trillion program that I have to eliminate it, the government will still be 63% bigger than it was in 2001 when that's all implemented. I mean, think about that. You cut $9 trillion and it's still 63% bigger than it was in 2001, which implies about a 3.5% annualized growth in the size of government. We can't afford it. We don't have an economy that can afford it. And we can't afford the inefficiencies that come from that size of a government. It's hurting us.
Next call comes from Williamsville, New York. This is Aisha, who's a Democrat there. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
Nice to be on with you.
Thank you.
Susan, I had sent in an email prior. I'm wondering whether you can pull that up. It has an answer key. And Senator Coburn, I'd like to thank you very much for taking on Grover Norquist. In fact, I think there's something treasonous about one gentleman holding an entire party hostage by making them take a pledge above and beyond the pledge that they take as their oath of office. I really would ask you to look into that. Now, my concern is, while I do believe we have a spending problem, we also have a revenue problem. And that comes from an understanding of who owes whom what. The operating budget owes trust funds, to, for example, the Social Security Trust Fund, $2.6 trillion. Some people say, well, that's an illusion. But the FICA taxes that were collected were not an illusion. It only became an illusion when it was put into the unified budget and then moved to pay for operating budget expenses. So if the trust funds are an illusion, Congress is the magician. We need to repay that money, and that is why there is a revenue issue. So while I'm fine with all the spending cuts, I do think an honest budget would require you all to destroy the unified budget, then require individual balanced budgets for the operating budget, for the trust funds, but only after the operating budget has returned the IOUs to Social Security and to Medicare Part A, and I believe there are 110 other trust funds, smaller ones which are paid for by fees. That is the only honest way to solve this problem. So please destroy the unified budget. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you're doing. I think you're very honorable. I just disagree with the way you're doing it.
Well, I think she's dead on. There's 120 trust funds that we've stolen the money from, put an IOU there, and then spent that money on something else. And the reason, you know, we hear all the time, Social Security doesn't need to be reformed. It's got $2.6 trillion in IOUs. The reason it needs to be reformed because it isn't sustainable, but we can't ever borrow the money in the markets because Congress has borrowed that money, stolen that money, and spent it. We've got to borrow against it. What we have to do is we have to reform it so that when we borrow the $2.6 trillion, they'll see we've done the right thing, and we can do that with actually helping those on the lower income scale in Social Security, and we can make it sustainable for 75 years. But I think she's absolutely right. In Johnson administration, they unified the budget. Then he started using that money to run the war in Vietnam so that he didn't have to have a tax increase for it. And ever since then, we've been dishonest with the American people about the true cost of things and imply that we can afford to do things that we really can't.
Monty Laban asks, what are the main areas that contributed to the growth of the federal government by 63% since 2001?
Well, no, it's doubled since 2001. After you take $9 trillion, it would be just 63%. Every area of the federal government has grown. Defense Department, I mean, it's out of control in terms of its purchasing of weapon systems, its layers of bureaucracy, knowing where it's spending money or how and what things cost. There's a great area of it. The generalized government in all sorts of areas. The Congress has created all sorts of new programs. I mean, just wait till Obamacare gets here and we have all these exchanges with all these people that are going to be in the exchange with a government subsidy, which is going to be about 45% of everybody that has real health insurance now through their employer are going to be shoved into exchange because the employers aren't going to cover them anymore. and you're going to see it grow. So, and that's not even in the list. So you can go through every department and look at it. You can actually go to our website, and we can direct you to find each agency and how it's grown. NASA, even though we don't have manned spaceflight going on now after the shuttle without going through the Russians, but yet their program's grown, but not in their areas of expertise, not in getting somebody into space. So I mean, it's a lack of discipline, and this really isn't. And I would make this point, Susan. We tend to blame presidents. It's not presidents. The Congress is absolutely incompetent when it comes to doing the oversight and directing and making choices about priorities. They refuse to make choices simply because they're not doing the hard work of knowing what's going on in the first place.
Tina Harold tweets, "There is an extreme gap between wealthy earnings and the stale wages of everyone else. The rich need to pay greater taxes."
Well, I think the top 20% paid 84% of the taxes.
They're responding to that. They think still because of the gap between wealthy earnings and stale wages.
What are you going to do? Right now, do you want the country to grow? So under that proposal, we would tax those people that have the capital that's going to create the jobs in this country and give it to the government rather than decrease the government spending and allow that money that they were going to tax to go into productive jobs. And the reason you have $3 trillion sitting on the sideline in businesses right now in this country not being invested because there's no confidence about what's going to happen in the future. So, look, wealthy people should pay their fair share. How much is their fair share? If you took 100% of everything that everybody makes above $250,000 in this country, if you took 100% of it, we'd still have about a $700 billion deficit. So let's take everybody's money, all of it, that makes above $250,000. That doesn't solve our problem. It doesn't come close to solving a problem. So it's a pipe dream, but what we have to be careful is the thing that built this country is the hope that people can get ahead, that can make it to a plateau. And if you start saying, we're going to punish you for going there, then there's not going to be any jobs created. And we're going to continue to export all our jobs.
Next caller is Tiffany, Republican in Rancho Cucamonga, California.
You're up early.
Yes, very, very much so. I just wanted to say that I support some of your ideals. However, as a middle-class person, it's difficult for me to support you as far as no tax increases or the high end not paying the 35 or 39% that they're supposed to, because everybody else is hurting. And I look at my budget and I say, you know, I really can't afford to give any more. My salary's not increasing, and I can't really support your plan if you're planning to keep your belly fat, and I'm starving over here. So I think we need to do something a little bit more balanced. And thank you for taking my call.
Well, you're welcome. If you look at my $9 trillion, if you go on my website, coburn.senate.gov, and you look at the $9 trillion, you'll see that a trillion of that comes from eliminating deductions and tax credit for the wealthiest people in this country, which causes them to pay more taxes, but also reforms the tax code so that we lower rates ultimately so we get more money invested in the economy, and that will create an additional $850 billion in revenue to the federal government just through economic growth. So, but when I say to you that the government is twice the size it was 10 years ago, you have to ask the question, is the problem revenue, or is the problem we've allowed the government to get out of control? And I would tell you the government's into things that she has no business being in, and we have duplication. You know, we have 180 programs for economic development that come from the federal government to the states, and not one of those programs, not one of them has a study ever done on it to say, is it effective? Matter of fact, we know a lot of them aren't. We know a lot of them are duplicate. So there's just area upon area which I can show you in detail where we're incompetent in terms of what we're trying to do. Our hearts are big, we have great intentions, but the fact is the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And I would tell you the very mistake would be is if you don't cut the $7 or $8 trillion that is in my plan and you do raise taxes, we're toast, we're history, because we're not ever going to reverse it.
You are also calling for Social Security eligibility age to rise to 70?
No, 69. What we allow it to do is to rise slowly, but we have the only plan that is sustainable Social Security repair. And one of the key things that we do with that, we actually help on the bottom end. For those that are poor, you actually get more of a bump, but we have more of a means testing on the upper end. So you get back. What people fail to remember is as you increase the taxes on Social Security doesn't really benefit because they have to pay them back out. There's a one-to-one formula. So as we bump that, we do a means test on it. The other thing we do, Susan, that something that hadn't been done in 25 years, and I was reminded by one of your earlier callers, is we totally revamp the disability program. We're in the midst, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation, in the midst of totally investigating the IRS on their disability program. Whether you saw the judge that had a 99% approval rating and did twice as many cases, but they were only for 2 lawyers in West Virginia. That's happened in a lot of places across the country. There's some graft and corruption in the Social Security Administration as far as disability. 1 in 18 people in this country today is collecting a disability check. I can tell you 1 in 18 people in this country are not disabled. And I can give you personal experiences plus the studies that we've already seen.
1 out of 18 of the entire population?
Of the entire population? No. 1 in 18 people in this country today is collecting a disability check from Social Security. And people have to look around. What happened to them? The law says that if there's any job you can do in the economy, you're not disabled. And yet we've had a system at the Social Security system that implies the bias is you're disabled. And we would have to prove you're not. And it needs to be the other way. We've undermined self-reliance in this country. And now we hear people who can't do, we can't because I'm not giving that up. We have families where 14 members are collecting Social Security check. I mean, it's out of control. And what I want to do is, if somebody's truly disabled and needs my help, I want to make sure we're there to help them. But if somebody's gaming the system, I've got a word for them. In my remaining 5 years in Congress, I'm coming after you if you're playing a game of the system, stealing from the rest of the American people.
Last call for you is from Dalton, Georgia. This is Susan as well on the independent line. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to remind people that how intelligent our founding fathers were, because they set up a republic and they knew that a democracy would run into this mess because people would start voting themselves goodies out of the Treasury. Mm-hmm. But here is a tax that I think that the Tea Partiers would get behind. It could be called the put your money where your mouth is tax. Everyone who has voted for increased government, people who have voted to give our tax dollars to foreign countries so that they could use it to kill our soldiers, people who are behind saddling us with all these illegal aliens that cost billions of dollars each year, people like George Soros.
Susan, we're almost out of time.
Winfrey.
Could you get to your point?
Yes. Tax them down to $250,000 a year so that we can use that to help balance the budget.
Okay, thanks.
Well, unique idea. The implementation and impracticality of it wouldn't work. Look, we need to go back and say, what was the genius of America? It's a limited government with a limited range that the federal government was supposed to do. It created the fastest growing, the most progressive, the greatest wealth acquiring nation the world has ever seen. The genius was liberty and freedom and limited government, and we no longer have limited government, and we no longer have a government we can afford. And we have so many programs that we can get rid of that don't do anything, that cost a ton of money, that nobody would ever miss except the people employed in the programs. And what we need to do is have a renovation of ideas and a renewal that says we're going to go back and embrace what made us great. And you'll see jobs grow, just like a national sales tax. You'll see an economy that booms. It'll boom. We still have the same American spirit. It's there. It has been stifled because the government is smothering us, and we need to unsmother it.
Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, we have heard a discussion that the Senate may be in session, but you're not sure yet.
I'm not sure.
We'll stay tuned and see. And certainly the debate discussions continue about the debt as August 2nd ticks closer. Thank you, Senator, for being here.
Susan, good to
this
be
morning.
with you.
Appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break, and our final guest on this Friday morning will be Congressman Steve Israel of New York. He has the job of getting House members